How dare you!
Huh?
There's no saving it. We need to pull it out by the roots. Wipe the slate clean. Burn it down!
So yeah, you're seeing this monster video pop up on your feed, a video with well over 3 hours of content talking about the Life is Strange series.
You blow me, Rachel.
Chloe.
As I'm in the middle of doing a big transition at the moment, I just figured this would be a fun little idea to combine these 3 videos on Life is Strange into one super video. Makes it easier for people to see my content on them, allows new people to binge the content in more long form, and allows me to have a large video on the channel for people who want to come back again and again. But before we begin, I have to say something that's very important. I do plan on revisiting the Life is Strange series later this year. These games are fascinating to different degrees, and in videos, I often focused on different aspects, such as unlikable characters, how not to do a prequel, and how politics can make a story dull. Still, I want to give the games their fair shake and not just focus on the aspects that I did above. Either that or focus on separate topics concerning these titles. And to address something, yes, I am aware of Erlich Salad Yes, I did get inspiration from him. No, you don't have to keep reminding me about it. I gave credit in my initial videos, and I'm giving credit now for my points that I have taken from him, and I'm going to admit that. So with that, I'm going to disappear and allow you guys this ramshackled combination of a video. So, when I made my video about YiiK, I made it clear that Alex of the game was an unlikable protagonist, and that it's a balancing act in order for you to make sure that you don't turn off your audience when you are introduced to a character like this.
You guys realize how messed up all this is? My 12-year-old sister killed herself. She died right here. Right where we're standing.
Hey, dude, cool it with that! No one cares about your sister right now. We almost just died ourselves!
Obviously, I think you guys understand where I stand with that game and Alex.
When you think about it.
I think it's important to understand that unlikable characters can work, and while they're designed to be not likable, they can still be adored by people. Villains are a great example of this, since these are characters by design to be hated by the audience, and yet you'll see people who will go gaga over these characters who do terrible things, sometimes to a very disturbing degree. Today I want to talk about hateable characters, providing a good example and a bad example of how to do this kind of character in video games specifically. Because, while if you want to make a hateable character, said hateable character can turn to a character that people can come to love, even when they really shouldn't.
Show me your strength.
The 2 examples I'm giving are both game franchises that, coincidentally enough, are getting 3rd official installments to their franchises this year even. And now that I've gotten that out of the way, Life is Strange fucking sucks. So look, I know I'm talking about a game that's years old at this point, has a lot of popularity behind it, and has a number of awards to its name. And part of the reason why I'm even bringing this up is because of the fact that the 3rd part in the series of the games is coming out, which, hey, whatevs, looks interesting, I guess?
Sure, Jan.
But there are a ton of problems that seem to fly under the radar that not a lot of people are willing to talk about when it comes to the first game and its prequel. I'm not saying that I see the truth, and what I'm about to say is nothing but fact. But this is just stuff that has bugged me after coming back to the game years after I initially played it. Still, for those who are in the back who don't know about this game, Life is Strange is about a girl named Max Caulfield, because of course we need to have a Catcher in the Rye reference in our teen drama in order to flex our big writer brains, who has the ability to rewind time, use this power to save a childhood friend named Chloe, who then decides to use and abuse Max's powers throughout the game.
Jesus, I shot myself! Ugh, I shot myself! Back up! Back up!
Stupid gun.
In order to investigate the disappearance of her friend, Rachel.
I had such a crush on her. Until I met you, Lois. You're my silver medal.
So the 2 decide to play as Hardy Boys.
So what do you Hardy boys want?
And are out to solve this missing person's case. The basic idea is that you've got Max, who's a complacent introvert, working with Chloe, the troublemaking extrovert, and their personalities and characterizations are supposed to complement each other to help push their relationship onto the viewers, as well as showcase that these 2 grow closer throughout their hardships. It's basic storytelling 101. Introduce 2 characters, put them in a situation, the 2 learn from each other, and grow because of their relationship. Bada bing, bada. Obviously, for the sake of time and such, I'm boiling down this formula to its basics, but that's typically where this type of story goes. Now, have you read the title, it's right down there, and as such, this should give you a clue as to why I'm bringing this up. Well, the thing is, with the character Chloe, the game expects you to like her, just as Max does throughout the story. Here's the thing though. Chloe's a terrible character, both in the sense of being a terrible character story-wise and an unlikable, terrible person. And yet, the game expects me to actually care for her. Alright, so just to point out this, because I know there's going to be that one guy in the audience, yeah, I'm aware it's my opinion. You're watching an opinion piece on a platform where pretty much every single person is giving their opinions. That is not a form of criticism. The game has a lot of inconsistencies when it comes to not only the characters, but the mechanics of the game as well. Stuff like how they ripped off the telltale form of storytelling.
I will remember this conversation.
Nope! There's even issues with the time traveling aspect of the story. And I know this is more based on the gameplay, but considering that the time travel is a major portion of the story and is necessary for some of the major plot threads, especially since you use those powers to save Chloe from killing herself, we do need to talk about those before we actually get into the character writing. But hey, if you don't care, I'm sure I've got some chapters down below for you to skip to. So feel free to save some time. We'll be talking about the 3 aspects of time travel in the story. Inventory, teleportation, and the bullshit new power that comes out of left field. When it comes to Max's inventory, we're blatantly told by the game that anything in your inventory when you rewind time will remain there. So if you pick up a hammer in the bathroom, instead of using it to break the mirrors, you take it with you when you travel through time. Makes sense, right? Well, unfortunately, the game likes to play fast and loose with the rules. In the same chapter, when we see a character being accosted by David, the resident security guard and Chloe's stepfather, Max has the non-choice to take a picture or intervene. Now, the smart player, especially those who have any sort of reading comprehension in a game that is, well, all about paying attention to words, you would know that you'll be able to do both of these because of the aforementioned inventory system. Because you're able to go back in time after this event and redo it. You do the first go around by taking the picture, reverse time, and then after you have the photo in your pocket, you go and defend Kate. Best of both worlds, right? Well, for some reason, the photo disappears. I guess ninjas from outer space popped in to steal the photo from Max's pocket so they could deliver it to the great tentacled beast that is Cthulhu for, I don't know, lunch. Look, this is going to be a long video. I need some fun in order to keep my sanity, especially with the amount of assets I'm working with this. Now, you may be thinking, okay, so maybe that's a bit of a misstep in the powers, but mistakes happen, and I agree. Stuff like this does happen, and unless it's a reoccurring deal, I tend not to make it a big deal most of the time. But here's the problem, it is a recurring deal. And that leads us to our second issue with the story's temporal rules, teleportation, or the lack of it as it were. I know, it's confusing, but let me explain. The very first time Max uses her powers when Chloe gets off in the girls' bathroom, that's not a spoiler, and even if it was, I warned you people already at the beginning. Anyway, when Max uses her power, she teleports back to her classroom. Nothing too out of the ordinary, it just makes sense. And then the player gets control, and Max's time-traveling powers activate, keeping her in place. Bravo, don't nod, you managed to break your rules in the first go. That'd be pretty impressive if it wasn't a common trend nowadays in writing. Then finally we get to the bullshit power. By looking at a photo, Max can time travel back to a point where the photo was taken. Just to point something out, this was never established in the story before and comes out of nowhere. It's literally what a lot of people like to call an ass pull. And the first time we do see this, well, there's a reason why I'm explaining how these powers work, and you'll see later. Now, I want to make it clear, the reason why we went on a tangent to talk about Max's time powers is that it's going to save me time in this video that I'd rather get it out of the way right now and save some explanation later. Back to the story, more specifically in the context of this video, the whole point of this game is the relationship between Max and Chloe. That's the main hook of this game's story, especially considering that the gameplay is messy, to say the least. So you would think that this is the main part of the game, as the entire narrative is built around these two characters, that they'd have to be likable to some degree, or at the very least be interesting. Unfortunately, that is not the case, at least to me. A lot of this stems from the fact that Chloe is a terrible character, and yes, I'm well aware of the title of my own video, I wrote the damn script. But here's the problem, the game expects me to like Chloe, especially since there's no option to let Chloe kick the bucket.
Help! I'm stuck!
Now, I know what you're thinking, again. Deja vu. Which is weird because I haven't written this down in the script yet, but I'm not actively wanting to kill this character. Sure, there are characters in games that I wish I could strangle, but that's mainly due to how they're portrayed and how the story goes. Well, that and sometimes their game is just utter trash when I play it.
He literally just disappeared and went into the fucking wall.
But for me, Chloe is probably the worst aspect of Life is Strange, and unfortunately I can't do anything about it. I mean, I can rant about it on YouTube and maybe someone will listen to what I have to say. So let's go over why Chloe has such a negative effect on me and why I believe that she's the perfect example of how not to make a hateable character.
Downward spiral, downward spiral, downward spiral, downward spiral, downward spiral.
Side note, when I get to my examples, I'm going to be jumping around and not going into chronological order, probably, so heads up on that if this seems a little confusing. Characters doing bad things doesn't make them a badly written character. You need only look towards characters like Brad Armstrong, Cloud Strife, Kyle Hyde, or any of the characters in the Disgaea series. These characters do things or act in ways that are unsavory to anyone who plays the games they're in. After all, when you have characters who display negative traits in a game, you have a chance of making your audience less receptive to the character. But there are things that you can hook the character onto that keep your audience invested. It can either be through the overall story, the gameplay, or it can even be other characters of the game. There needs to be something there. And thankfully, Chloe actually has something like that. While I will be harsh in my critiques, I like to think that I can be fair. When I first played Life is Strange, I can admit the time-traveling aspect was an interesting concept, and learning that Max and Chloe were old friends, the former saving the latter, it was a good enough hook that wanted me to see where this would go. The problem is, it didn't go too far before it fell off a cliff. As I stated before, the big problem with Chloe is that the game expected me to like her, but throughout the narrative, I only found more and more reasons to dislike her. Let's discuss those reasons, shall we? One of the earlier examples that I actually found intriguing was when you're in Chloe's room, and you attempt to have Max hide from David, Chloe's stepfather.
One of my guns is missing. Did you take it?
Oh god, I didn't take your stupid gun. You do know I believe in gun control?
Wait, is that grass? You been token up again in here?
Oh yeah, guns, weed. You were tripping balls.
I'm sick of your disrespect. Tell me the truth. That's an order.
From the interaction, I can understand why Chloe would have an issue with her stepfather.
Little.
Fuck you, pig!
Listen. You asked for that. You know exactly what you're doing.
You are so pathetic.
So the guy can be abusive, and my first thought was, I can see why Chloe is the way she is because of her home life. That's good. Then the magical time powers got me curious to check something.
I'm Price. Chloe Price. Bang!
Look, I'm going to be upfront. While I can understand Chloe's hatred of David and how he can be a bastard in this is not a good flag for me to like Chloe, since David was right to suspect her. Oh, and I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up this lovely touch of irony.
Down.
Chillax, sister. It's not even loaded. Yet.
I thought you believed in gun control.
Yes, I believe I should control the gun. It's the men who need to be checked. Jesus, I shot myself! Ah!
As an additional note, you can also not see the slap. It's a determinant factor and one that isn't set in stone from every gameplay. So, technically speaking, a player can miss the action and possibly not see what happens. Now, this is not a bad thing, but it's also something that kind of makes it harder for me to actually like Chloe in one regard. Now, character faults are a thing in literature. They are a means of allowing the audience to connect to characters on deeper levels as we can see a bit of ourselves in the character. Because, last time I checked, we're not perfect beings. Chloe's cockiness and being a liar are character faults, not a weakness in the writing. However, when there are numerous character faults in a singular character, then you run the risk of overstuffing your character and basically running into a disaster. Let's get back to the weed situation as a proper example, since if you allow Chloe to take the blame for her own drugs in her room, you get this scene later down the line.
We're both already in so much trouble.
You can always let me get busted like you did with the weed.
Chloe, that was your weed in your room, and you told Max to find a place to hide. Not to mention, there was this line.
He would have been a bigger dick if he caught you in here.
So, expecting responsibility on Max and saying something like this raised the asshole flag to me. Now, let's focus on the relationship that Chloe has with Max.
So we should figure out how to best use and abuse your power with a test.
After Max demonstrates her powers to Chloe in one of the most redundant ways I've seen in games for a long time, Max gets a phone call from one of her other friends, Kate Marsh. For context, Kate was recently drugged, and there was an internet video of her posted that was at the very least scandalous. She's been being made fun of for quite a long time, and is not doing too well. Now, one would think something like this isn't a big issue. Friends answer phone calls all the time when hanging out with other friends, but...
It's Kate Marsh from Blackwell.
Big what?
You don't call me once in 5 years and now you're all over some biatch you see every day at school? I see how you roll. So go ahead, chat up Kate Marsh from Blackwell. I've got other people to hang out with too.
I'm sorry? Why is this a big deal? Not like you can't answer the phone and walk outside the restaurant at the same time. Chloe, I don't know if you're aware of this, but humans are capable of doing more than one thing at a time. Now, this is a small detail, but one that really speaks a bit more about Chloe's character, especially when we consider other actions that really turned me away from her character. For a little more background, the reason that Chloe wants to use Max's powers is to find her friend, Rachel Amber, the MacGuffin of the game. At least until... But that's fine. As itself, it's a fine motivation. The problems crop up when Chloe continuously wants to use Max's powers, which when you consider that there's a scene where Max gets a nosebleed and passes out after using her rewind powers a little too much, you'd think that ring of some warning bells within Chloe's brain that maybe using these powers in excess wouldn't be a good idea. But nope! Throughout the story, Chloe is ready and willing to abuse Max's powers. And to top it off, and I know this is probably a meme at this point, but the fact that you have to constantly save Chloe from some of the dumbest deaths imaginable does not help. For example, the train tracks. Everyone and their mother calls this a stupid move, and I can't give Max any leeway here, since she could have attempted to rewind time back before the two laid down on the tracks. Then again, what do I expect from someone who likes Final Fantasy Spirits Within?
Maybe I could sneak in and watch Final Fantasy Spirits Within. I don't care what anybody says, that's one of the best sci-fi films ever made.
You make me sick!
I think I've shown that I really don't like Chloe, and that's a shame because the game is honestly focused on the relationship between Max and Chloe. So if I dislike one of the members of this dynamic duo, and that's the main focus of the game, well, 2 plus 2 doesn't equal fish for a reason. I'm not going to go through every part of why I dislike Chloe, but there are a few other points I want to bring up that I feel are important for this discussion. So in Chapter 3, we get a confrontation between David and Chloe. It's getting pretty heated, and well, the best way to describe it is just to see the scene itself.
No, you and Chloe think you know more than anybody, like all teenagers.
Leave Max alone, David. Stop threatening students.
He threatens them with surveillance cameras, so he can spy on everybody. Like he spies on all of us here.
Don't start, Chloe. Not now.
Yeah, I'm just always starting shit, right? You're a total paranoid.
One of my guns is missing. Did you take it?
Oh god, I didn't take your stupid gun.
Down.
Chillax, sister. It's not even loaded.
Obviously, this movie has its head up its own anus.
You used to call me a loser for getting kicked out of Blackwell. So who's the loser now, David? Who haven't you accused or harassed? Between your investigations into Rachel and Kate, what have you done besides get in trouble?
Now, you can side with either Chloe or David here, and it's here I have to explain something about myself. I don't consider myself to be a too confrontational person in real life. I usually tend to want to listen to both sides of an argument, and I kinda get annoyed when one side doesn't want to hear out the other side and makes things worse on their own assumptions on the other side. Throwing the fact that this scene is in the game,
I don't want to fight with you anymore. I don't want to fight with anyone anymore.
I at least want to hear David out. And what happens when I want to try to be a bit more negotiable in this sense?
Thanks for letting me down again, Max. Why can't you just rewind so I don't have to see you defending that asshole?
You know, I gotta say that this is really rich coming from Chloe. I don't know if it's because I'm an old man at this point yelling at kids to get off his lawn, but honestly, I can see both David and Chloe being in the wrong and in the right here. Both have good intentions, but both are doing what they are doing in messed up ways. To provide a little more context, earlier we had to break into a school office and look at documents that weren't for our eyes. Stuff like private records, you know, breaking the law. It's quite hypocritical for Chloe to go on this tangent when she's no better. And may I remind you, I am well aware that people like Chloe, but please see it from my perspective that we've got a character who's willing to use their friend for their own means to the point where it hurts her, happens to be rude, steals firearms and lies about it, is willing to steal from the handicap fund, yes, that's a thing, sees herself as the center of the universe and is a massive hypocrite. Please, tell me why I'm supposed to like this character. I understand that these are faults and are character driven, but when you have so many unlikable characteristics on a character, it greatly overshadows any actual good that the character may have to them. What's worse is this line.
Grow up. God, you're not the only one in Arcadia Bay with problems.
Oh, hey! Max finally found her spine and is actually calling out Chloe. And then...
Gotta blame somebody, otherwise it's all my fault. Fuck that.
My god. They're not wearing seatbelts. This comes after the realization of learning some facts about Rachel Amber and Chloe's drug dealer. Which, by the way, the two broke into the guy's trailer in order to get that information, so... Yay! More illegal activity! How's that pistol up there, Chloe?
I shouldn't be up here.
To be fair, I understand where Chloe's coming from with her emotions being all whack. After all, part of the reason why she's acting like this is how her father passed away in an accident right before Max moved away from Arcadia Bay. Losing your father and having your best friend disappear around the same time can be a tough experience. I should know, I've actually experienced something similar. There's a problem though. This apparently has been going on for 5 years. And from what I've seen in the prequel Before the Storm, well, let's just say I don't really have a lot of empathy for Chloe after that. Now, we get to one of the worst parts about this game. Remember when I went on that tirade about how Max was able to travel back in time by looking through photos?
So you know, Jeff, you were not creating 6 different timelines.
Of course I am, Abed.
Yeah, she does exactly that. Max prevents Chloe's father from dying in a car accident. And when Max returns, she finds that Chloe is now crippled. What?! Oh boy, this is some level of... Funnily enough, this version of Chloe is actually pretty empathetic. I mean, aside from asking Max to help her commit seppuku, she's actually thinking more about her family and how her condition is a burden to them. But the problem is, the writers had to cripple Chloe for me to like her as a character. And I need to stress, I empathize with this Chloe, not Blue Chloe, who's willing to throw anyone under the bus for her problems. If anything, this actually accentuates how unlikable Blue Chloe is.
Hello? I hate that word, no offense.
I don't know if I have to say this, but I don't think this sort of writing is all that strong, especially when this is really kind of pointless. After all, Max goes back to the original timeline after she kills Chloe. Yeah, that's a thing. So what was the point of this? To demonstrate that Max's powers have consequences? That's kind of been being beaten into my head throughout this entire game. My god, I've done about 6 pages about this. I need to move on. There's 2 more instances I want to discuss, and then we'll move on to the next portion of the video essay. So after some tomfuckery in the plot, Max goes back in time in order to prevent Chloe from dying.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
I'm being a little bit vague since while I dislike the twists in the story, I'm not going to spoil everything about it. Max goes back in time via a photo in order to convince Chloe from going to where they think the culprit is, because Chloe gets killed because of it.
Chloe, wait, listen. I can walk and listen, okay?
But calling a friend and walking? Oh, that's just an affront to my pride. Anyway, during this sequence, Max has to try to convince Chloe from not leaving in order to make sure she doesn't die.
That fucker is already dead? How do you know that?
Chloe, Max has time powers. Did you forget that?
Jesus, I shot myself!
And you have to convince Chloe that going to this location is a bad idea, even after telling Chloe that the things get effed up if you go. She still wants to go. I'm sorry, but this just makes me question if Chloe has the memory of a goldfish. If a friend who has the ability to travel through time has used said ability multiple times, especially to save you, and is telling you straight up, hey, this is a bad idea, maybe, just maybe, you should listen? This conversation is basically Max telling Chloe that she has time powers and that you should listen to someone who has time powers so you don't die. The sad part is, I don't think Chloe is being an idiot here. Not in the way of Alex of YiiK, who had the inability to read a cover of a record label before wasting my time for an hour and a half.
Ah, yes. The Mystical Ultima LP Legend by Vela Wild.
Did you say Vela Wild?
Yeah. But didn't you know this already? It's on the cover. Did you even read it?
No, I get that Chloe is emotional. I get that emotions drive you to do these stupid things. But after everything that has happened in the span of a week, I just find this to be extremely stupid. Now, after all that, what is my point? I think I've already explained this, but despite the game doing a lot of things that made me personally dislike Chloe as a character and maybe someone I'd rather not meet never in real life, the game expects me to like her, to care about her. Perhaps maybe I'm the minority in this, because when you look at forums or YouTube videos of the mountains of awards this game got, people praise this character and the relationship. there's a scene near the end of the game where sort of a inner demon of Max confronts regular Max.
Who are you? Holy shit, are you serial? I'm you, dumbass.
And I like this. It's actually calling out this relationship that the story is trying to convince me is great. But it gets kneecapped with an imaginary Chloe coming in and saying,
Dude, do not even fuck with her head. She knows what we went through together this week, and you don't. There's no way you can break up our team. This is reality.
Gee, that completely negates whatever inner demons Max said, Chloe. You are to SMRT. Thanks for the golden opportunity and interesting writing and throwing it out the window, don't nod. So since I've gone through all this, I think it's important that we talk about why Chloe doesn't work for me as a character. The story itself is trying to convince me that the relationship between Max and Chloe is a good thing, that it's worth saving, as demonstrated by all the times that Max goes back in time to save Chloe. But that flies in the face of how Chloe treats Max, from abusing her powers, to not trusting her, to even guilt-tripping if you disagree with Chloe even a little bit, even on the smallest of things. This, to me, is what a toxic relationship is, and it's utterly baffling that Max would want to continue this friendship with someone like this. Throw in the fact that the story ends with a single binary choice, one that contradicts the whole aspect of your choices matter. Well, let's just say it wasn't a hard decision for me.
I think that Chloe is a compelling character because she's pretty wounded in lots of ways. She's gone through a lot of things.
There's something so relatable about Chloe, and I think that's why so many people love her. It's because we all have something in us or something about her that we either want to be or already have.
I'm sorry, but when a character acts like this in a story that's trying to convince me that it's okay to treat your friends like this, even going so far as to attempt to make me sympathetic with a character by crippling her, I don't think that's what makes a compelling character. That makes a character that is designed to be hated, but expected to be liked? And this is true. The game needs me to care for Chloe, because the single binary choice that can render everything you've done obsolete is dependent on the players liking Chloe. And I'm sure a lot of people do like her. I mean, one look online with all the fan art of the character is enough to tell me that people have a thing for her. But I'm sorry, I cannot bring myself to like a character who does all of this and has an attitude like that. Even if I can find some relatable stuff to the character, it just doesn't work for me. So, since I've explained how a hateable character doesn't work, is it possible to make a character work like that in a story? Well, obviously that's possible. I gave plenty of examples of that earlier. But for the sake of continuing a trend with games that are getting a third entry soon, let's talk about something different in this regard. No More Heroes is an adventure hack-and-slash game written, directed, and designed in 2007 by Suda51. You might be familiar with him with other such titles such as Killer 7 and Lollipop Chainsaw.
Don't worry about the smell. I just shit myself.
But it was No More Heroes that really put Suda51 on the map, especially in the West. It's a bit of a similar story to that of Don't Nod when they made Life is Strange, and how that game was really the first that allowed the company to take off. Answered all the comments that I dare to compare the two. But what is No More Heroes about, and how does it work in creating an effective Jackass character? Well, we have to look towards the main character, Travis Touchdown. To put it simply, Travis is what you call an otaku, a person who is obsessed with computers or particular aspects of popular culture to the detriment of their social skills.
Fuckhead!
Basically weebs. Travis is what a lot of people would consider an otaku to be like. He is unemployed, he's got a vast collection of anime figures, he winks off to anime, oh, and he kills people to make his living. By all accounts, this is a character that the audience shouldn't like due to his personality traits and role. Throw in the fact that Travis's goal in killing all these people is, well...
Okay, how about this? If I become #1, will you do it with me?
Yep! My god, you've got some thirst going on here if you're willing to kill the tap that. Guys, killing the tap that ass is never right. So from that description, Travis sounds like a character that isn't the best person around. Hell, fun fact, Travis was actually designed after Johnny Knoxville, the Jackass of fame. And from what I understand, this video itself was what Suda showed his team in order to inspire them for Travis's character and design. Chest-biting gators aside, we have the grounds of a character who, for all intents and purposes, should just be annoying and unlikable as Chloe. Both characters are representations of social archetypes that are seen, so by all accounts, Travis should be just as bad as Chloe, right? Wrong! You see, unlike Chloe, there's this one thing that Travis has. development. Now, to explain some stuff about No More Heroes so you're up to speed, Travis Touchdown joined the United Assassins Association, or the UAA, to become the #1 assassin because, well, as he puts it,
I want to be #1. How's that? Short and simple enough for you? It's gonna be a long, hard road. But who knows? Could kick ass. Could be dangerous. Could totally suck. What do you say, bro? Join me. Let's see how far we can take this. And for you there holding the controller right now, just press the A button. Let the bloodshed begin.
And this is where the development comes into play. You see, unlike Life is Strange with its narrative-driven gameplay, No More Heroes doesn't have the whole "your choices matter," but not really effect, so it has to rely on a linear narrative structure. So whenever we get scenes with Travis interacting with the other cast, we're no longer in the reins of Travis. We're watching Travis, much like how we watch Chloe's actions. What we are seeing is how Travis reacts to the top assassins that he fights, and in those interactions we can get a grasp of Travis's character. Take for example the tutorial boss, Death Metal.
Hey, you know what paradise is, right?
Paradise.
This is paradise, the place where dreams are fulfilled. Well, you've had your dream, old man. Time to wake up.
This is no paradise.
All right, then what is it?
A place to die.
Huh. I'm glad you and I are on the same page here.
Aside from the preamble cutscene, this is the first time we actually get to see Travis's character, and from what we're shown, he's, well,
arrogant, crude little shit.
Couldn't say it better myself. Because of the style of writing, players would be able to see Travis's personality and how it clashes with the other assassins, with the first two bosses of the game, Death Metal and Dr. Peace, who isn't actually a doctor, he's a detective. Yeah, don't ask me why. With these two bosses, we see Travis's brash and crude side.
Thank you. Mighty kind of you.
Nice set of pipes you got there, old man.
It has always been my dream to perform in a stadium such as this. A gentleman from the association told me I could have any stage I wanted today. Now, how could I refuse such a kind offer?
Courtesy of me and my entry fee, no doubt.
And yet, there's something to consider. If Travis really was so dead set on being #1 of assassins, why let these two characters spout off whatever they said? When you think of assassins, you don't think of this kind of behavior. After all, isn't it easier to kill someone when they aren't aware? It's just common sense, after all. But that's when a certain line drops.
Man! This is what I live for! Fighting your own kind. Nothing's more gratifying.
Fighting your own kind. I'm sorry, Travis, but assassins aren't typically so gung-ho about fighting. Anyone who's ever played a Hitman game can tell you that going in loud isn't the smartest way about this. And yet, here Travis is, fighting against these assassins, listening to them speak, and hell, allowing them to get ready to fight. One thing to note is that this is according to Sylvia, the spokeswoman of the UAA and the center of Travis's desires.
Perhaps you've forgotten, these fights are an official game. If your opponent dies for whatever reason, according to the rules of conduct, it is your win.
That's fucked up! That's the stupidest rule I've ever heard! This guy's mine, and you just want me to let him go?
I know that comes later in the game, but it really shows that Travis doesn't want an easy kill, and it's reflected in how he's willing to give his opponent what is essentially their final words. That actually says a lot about Travis when you think about it. When we get to the #8 assassin, Shinobu, there's a few interesting lines after we watch her kill her classmates.
You killed them?
Such a gentleman. Are you asking out of tactical curiosity? Or are you just fucking with me?
Bet they didn't offer much resistance.
You got a problem with that? You got no idea how hard it is to hide your true self around here.
Hey, I'm not accusing anybody.
This goes back to what I was saying. Travis had a clear shot to kill someone who is in his way to the top, but he doesn't take that opportunity to do so.
It's actually pretty hard to take cheap shots when your enemy is as bloodthirsty as yourself.
With this line, though, I suspect it has more to do with a form of respect. Sure, Travis can be crass and crude, but here's the thing, he doesn't want to kill someone without a fight. A more noble aspiration you would expect from someone who goes... Despite being a horrible person, we do see that Travis does have a code of honor, not unlike that of a samurai, so despite his crass nature, there are things that I like about Travis. Even more so when you realize that he still has a human side to him, as demonstrated that he does not take the life of Shinobu when he defeats her. It also gives a brief look at one of Travis's weaknesses, and his softer side. He doesn't have the heart to kill women, especially not young ones. Despite being a bloodthirsty killer, there are still things he holds sacred to a degree, at least in this point. Now, I'm not going to go over every ranked match because that would get redundant really quickly, but there are two more that I need to go over of them. One of them, number 6, is Holly Summers.
Do you like fighting?
Yep.
Do you like killing?
Live for it.
Do you like fear?
Can't say. Never felt it.
Do you accept death?
Death? Never crossed my mind.
Death is the only truth. You are still a mere butt.
That's not a good thing, you know. Seeking meaning in everything. Especially killing. That's a bad habit among smart little girls these days.
Come closer and you will understand everything.
I'm ready. Anywhere, anytime.
Just your ordinary assassin. Such a disappointment.
Are you in the mood yet? Normal assassins don't shoot the shit like this. They see their target and kill them!
At the beginning of the fight, we still see Travis being his brash self, showing him that this is pretty much just a game with sex at the end being his prize. But then, this happens.
This is not mercy. You can't kill a woman. Pathetic. If you can't kill a woman, you are less than a thug. You'll never make it to the top. That's okay. I seem to have a thing for stupid, pathetic men like you. I can accept defeat if it comes from your hand. I will let you in on a secret. Assassins must die when they lose. Open your eyes and never look back. Promise, never forget me.
Huh?
Thank you. The moment you hesitated, I felt your embrace.
Hold up!
Academics like to fantasize too, you know.
Wait! Number 6! No! Forgive me, number 6. I never meant to shame you.
A single moment of hesitation was all it took for the players to see Travis's true nature. Yes, he spared Shinobu before, but there's where it gets serious. Holly berates Travis for failing to finish her off, and instead of using the opportunity to survive or attack Travis again, she pushes Travis to become a better assassin and accept the death of his opponents by blowing herself up. It is also the first time that Travis feels remorse or regret at the loss of life, giving her an improvised burial. He also regrets his weakness and inability to kill her properly, having shamed her by doing so. Now we see that Travis comes to a realization that this isn't just a game, that this is more than just a means of getting scratch and some action in bed. These are human lives that he's been taking.
Forgive me, number 6. I never meant to shame you.
You are now 6th in rank.
What was her name?
That is not important anymore.
You're right. But I owe her at least that.
And unfortunately, with how the UAA is formed, Travis is trapped in this situation. Because just like him going after higher assassins, there are lower ranks coming after him. So there's only one way to go, and that's to the top. After this fight, Travis shows no more mercy to his opponents. He can't run, so there's only one more thing to do. The last boss I'll talk about is the final one. Well, aside from the true final boss, but hey, spoilers ahead. During the rank 1 fight, we finally learn more about Travis's backstory.
I remember. It was a hot summer day. There was someone standing behind my father and mother. That person killed my parents. The face, I can't make it out. Who are you?
Remember.
Who are you?
Try harder.
I think I can see it. Almost.
Do you recognize the face?
Now I remember everything. You're right. I don't have a father. At least not anymore. You killed him, didn't you?
Yes. And that's why you became an assassin. To kill me.
Now I get it. All those fights. It was for this. I lost everything that I ever cared about. That bitch took everything.
I can help you to get even.
She's a good con artist, that's for sure. She set up some killer fights.
So you and I finally meet. You should thank Sylvia.
Yeah, it's a lore dump, and one so plain that even the game itself makes fun of.
Jean, there's just one thing I want to ask you. Who are you?
Me? You don't need to know. All of your trivial questions will be answered in the afterlife.
Answer me!
It's impossible.
Impossible? What do you mean?
It's too terrible. It alone would jack up the age rating of this game even further.
So what? Who cares?
What if the game gets delayed? You don't want this to become No More Heroes forever, do you?
All right. I'll fast forward this so you can tell me.
Okay. I'll make it short and quick. You are my half-brother. You know that manga called Miyuki? The Japanese one? Well, it's like that. Your father abandoned my mother to run off with your mother. It broke her heart beyond repair. She killed herself. Knowing I had nowhere to go, he took advantage of me. Ever since I can remember, he molested me. We lived in this rotten apartment, and I was his slave.
Yeah, Sue likes to have a few fourth wall breaking jokes here and there, but regardless of that, and the fact that the game itself is pretty obviously dumping on the whole last minute twist aspect, to make a fast forward story even shorter, Jean here is Travis's half-sister. Their father did some really shitty stuff to her, and she had the short end of the stick, even doing some things that would be too... Ugh. As you saw, Travis did lose his parents right in front of his eyes, but compared to Jean's life, that's not really that big of a deal, especially when you consider that Travis's lifestyle. Where aside from that one incident, Travis has been living rather comfortably. Jean did what she could do in order to survive, selling her body, killing people, all because her father was a monster. Travis? He gets to wank off the anime. And yet, there's something to this fight. The fight with Jean represents integrity, as opposed to the superficial desires for riches and glamour that death metal represented at the beginning of the game. Travis knows Jean had good reasons for what she did, but as a matter of principle, he must kill her. And she accepts it. Travis even wishes her well in the afterlife. Defeating Jean represents Travis accomplishing what he set out to do, even though in the end he still doesn't get the glamorous life he'd hoped for, and he just returns to his life in his small dingy apartment with his cat, playing video games and wanking off to anime. Now, I'm not claiming that No More Heroes has the greatest writing in the world. It certainly doesn't, especially when you compare it to the sequel where there's a big plot hole. But here's what it does great. It makes it so people aren't forced to like Travis. And in comparison to his sister's life, Travis is pretty much living a privileged existence. And yet, despite his flaws, people seem to really like the guy, when by all accounts he has flaws that are just as bad, if not worse than Chloe's. After all, the game itself is made to be enjoyed by people who Travis falls into. People who love anime-based games and can be obsessed with it in blood. No More Heroes lets the player shamelessly indulge in the sex and violence of it all, but it takes it to such an extreme that it also makes the player think about the violence-obsessed culture and their own lifestyle. But here's the rub. No More Heroes is a bit of a satire. It loves violence in games. It's not saying that the violence is bad, just that it's kind of sick. It's saying, yes, enjoy the violence, but acknowledge that some of the stuff we enjoy is kind of disturbing when you think about it. In turn, the game never asks you to like Travis. It never puts pressure on the players to think he's a good person. And yet, there is something that draws people to Travis. He has a moral code, and one that he sticks to. Like a modern-day samurai, Travis follows the code of Bushido. Courage, respect, integrity, duty, moe. These are words that can be used to describe Travis' touchdown. Travis never runs from a fight. He's always continuing forward. Despite his rude nature, Travis does hold respect for other assassins, even going so far as to allow them to speak their own monologues before the fights. Travis, throughout his journey, never uses underhanded tactics and is completely honest with his goals and motivations. When Travis starts his journey to the top, he continues on the path he's on. All the while, the game isn't expecting me to like Travis but to understand him, and to realize that while he does is bad, he still needs to do it because that's his goal. I'm sure at this point there's a prominent question in your guys' heads. Why compare Chloe and Travis? Especially considering the fact they're in completely different games, genres, and that I obviously have a bias here. Personally, these two characters are more alike than you think. Both have dead parents, both live in a society that disregards them, both have archetypes, punk and otakus, both of which are considered outcasts, and both are characters that people can relate to. Because despite what you may think, and since I actually don't like Chloe, I'd have to be an idiot to not realize there are people out there who do relate to the character. Hell, even I can see something relatable to her from me. She lost her father and, well, I really don't want to say it. As I stated, Life is Strange narrative has a dependence on the player finding the relationship between Max and Chloe as something to protect. No More Heroes doesn't have that same thing happening. It's not asking me to like Travis or try to make him out to be a better person than he actually is. If anything, I think Max and Chloe's relationship is more of an example of a toxic relationship between two characters. Now watch as so many people begin to write comments about how I cherry-picked scenes, or that I didn't read the book, or use whatever buzzwords in order to ignore this. Life is Strange is an interesting beast, because while I hate Chloe, and by extension the relationship between her and Max, there are things I do find interesting. I like how the story tackles subjects such as online harassment, lack of social acceptance, desperation, and depression. And for that, I applaud in doing so in a way that is tasteful for a manner, especially for its teenage audience. Hell, while I may have issues with how Don't Nod play fast and loose with the game's time travel mechanics, I will say it's a fascinating idea, especially for this genre of games. But what makes it hard for me to say that I like the game is that the game expects me to like Chloe, which sucks, because there's stuff about Chloe that I do admit that I can like and relate to, but because she doesn't have any actual growth in the story and is practically remains the same throughout it, it makes it hard for me to see her as a good character. Travis, on the other hand, doesn't have that issue, because while he's still unlikable throughout the story, he at least grows and learns from what he kills. I don't know, I guess I'm just some dude on the internet who apparently likes making people mad about things whenever he expresses an opinion. But in any case, in my eyes, I see Chloe as a character I am supposed to like because of the story, but I can't because of how she's written and how she interacts with Max. Still, I can admit I'm just a guy, a person, I have my own fallacies and biases, and I'm not saying that what you just watched is fact, but what I just feel. I'm not saying Life is Strange is totally trash, it's a product of its time, but I could say the same thing about No More Heroes. While I don't agree with that statement, some people have told me the game treats women way too poorly. Then again, the guys tend to get just as gruesome deaths and such. Still, I won't berate people who like Chloe. I understand that she can be likable because of subjective taste, but to me she's the worst Jackass character type out there, where the story needs me to like her to be effective. Now if you excuse me, I'm gonna wait for No More Heroes 3 because that's something worth my time.
Let's do this. Start the game.
See, you two Nancy Drews.
And then I fired again, and then I missed, and then I fired, and then I fired, and I missed. I missed both times.
High school sucks. High school sucks. Back to the lab again. Oh no.
You know, when it comes to prequels and sequels, there's a bit of a stigma with them all, especially when it's a work that's already beloved.
Hello there.
Star Wars is probably the best example of this stigma, especially when we consider how contentious both the prequels and the sequels can be among its fans. Regardless of where you personally stand with these films, they themselves have been quite divisive. But why is that? Well, today I want to focus on prequels. And there's a lot that can make prequels bad, but can that be applied to video game? Well, duh, you've read the title. You know exactly what two prequels I'm talking about. One of which I've already talked about in depth, which you can see here, and another which I talked about recently. The first is a game that we'll be talking about that is what I think is a bad prequel to a game I already think is bad. So, not a long time ago, I talked about Life is Strange.
I thought you believed in gun control.
Yes, I believe I should control the gun. It's the men who need to be checked.
Jesus, I shot myself! Ugh, I shot myself! Back up! Back up!
And I talk about how Chloe was essentially a terrible character, and how despite the fact that the game and its developers clearly wanted me to like and care for Chloe, I just couldn't. But as one would imagine, when you have an opinion on the internet, you'll get people who will, well...
It's funny because Life is Strange is, you know, an actually legitimate great game, so maybe you just have bad taste in interactive story games, because yeah, it absolutely is a great series. The first game especially.
Let's just say are special. But in my video, I acknowledge that while I didn't like Chloe, that there were a lot of people who do. And it's expected I got those fans that really make it hard to really respect the series. Funny thing about those kinds of fans is that despite the whole theme that underlies Life is Strange, that you should be open to other people and be open-minded, that these people clearly don't have that mindset. Oh well. Enough of dealing with the sadness. Let's talk about Life is Strange Before the Storm. Well, the prequel is an interesting beast, and unfortunately it's a game that I feel has the biggest issues that one can have when it comes to writing a prequel to an already established story. So yes, the MangaKamen man is being negative again to the popular game series, and yes, I do plan on covering the sequel to Life is Strange later down the line this year.
Everything is political, Sean.
Don't worry, Mr. Amber. I can tell that my progressive attitude is not welcome in this house.
So what is Before the Storm? Well, the premise is that we learn more about Chloe Price and Rachel Amber's relationship. And for those who are coming from my previous video and don't know, Rachel Amber was the friend that was the main source of the mystery for that game.
Whoa! How's this for handy?
Basically, she was the battery that powered the story and acted as the motivation for Chloe, and in turn acted as the motivation for Max to want to help Chloe. Now, to point out some things, since it's the elephant in the room, one of the biggest weaknesses for this game is that it's a prequel story. Because if you actually played the first game in full or watched it on YouTube, you would know where this story is going and you know what's going to happen to these characters. So when you get a scene like this, it loses any actual gravity to it. Also, I warned you all that there would be spoilers, that's what the disclaimer was for in the beginning, so no complaining.
No complaining.
Because in the first game, we learned that Rachel was killed by a teacher named Jefferson, and I know I'm going against what I said in my first video about not talking about the whole ending, but since it's more focused on the story as a whole this time around, I feel like I need to justify it. Also, Jefferson as the main baddie was such a terrible twist that I honestly don't feel bad for spoiling it. Now, what was I saying?
Diabetes.
Oh, right. Let me say this. Just because we know the destination, that doesn't mean the journey itself can't be entertaining. After all, prequels aren't really about the end result. They exist to help flesh out the backstory and act as how it came to happen. I recently discussed Yakuza 0, a game that you guys should really check out, and it too is a prequel story for the rest of the Yakuza series. And I'll talk more in depth on that in the second half of this video. But Yakuza 0, despite having the same weaknesses of Before the Storm, still has other factors that can help cover its weakness. Gameplay, minigames, and a gripping narrative that opens up a backstory for two characters that are really essential for the entire series. Before the Storm, however, has to rely on its characters and narrative in order to carry it, and unfortunately, in my eyes, it doesn't do a good job with that. But I want to make it clear that I'm not judging the game for simply being a prequel. I'm judging it based on its stories and characters, with the premise being in the background. And this is something that the fans apparently wanted, to see the relationship between Chloe and Rachel. So, let's see how well this turned out.
I'm headed out.
How do we begin this harrowing tale? Oh, right. I should point out there was a bonus episode put out that shows a little bit of Max and Chloe before Chloe's dad dies, with Max making a tape that says, "Sorry." Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Some people have told me this explains this scene.
You don't call me once in 5 years and now you're all over some biatch you see every day at school? I see how you roll. So go ahead, chat up Kate Marsh from Blackwell. I've got other people to hang out with too.
You're a cunt. You're a cunt. Stan says you're a cunt.
And while I can see how you would think that, this opens up a few other holes, like, if we have such a promise to Chloe, why didn't Max actually contact Chloe? There's no actual scene that explains this in the entire game. Not a good sign if your game, which is designed to flesh out the backstory of your characters, ends up making more questions than answers. But to be fair, this wasn't something that was part of the initial release, so unfortunately for me, I had the ability of foresight here. No. What we actually start is...
I like trains.
That's a little bit of a fun twist, but we actually start with Chloe trying to get into a Firewalk concert, and... Look, I get that Life is Strange was cited to get inspiration from Twin Peaks, but even a reference like that is a bit too much. Ugh.
You gotta let me in. Check it. I'm totally legit.
Hey, this is a tuna fishing license.
But we finally get to the actual gameplay.
Ugh, come on. What
a
could
girl
it
like
hurt?
you
See,
with pretty flowers on her bicycle.
Damn playground to me.
Is
your boss your mom? Follow up. Don't care. Do you live in your boss's basement?
You could have a flamethrower, an army of robot
Are you going to
ninjas,
go
and a
home now?
So we went from time manipulation to talking smack. Alright, normally this isn't a big deal, cause I'm not expecting Chloe to develop some sort of superpowers in the past and suddenly forget it in time for the main game. But this mechanic is just not doing it for me. Not only because does it not really play to the same strength as Max's time manipulation in this type of game, but also...
You with pretty flowers on her bicycle.
Don't get me wrong, this falls into Chloe's character, I guess, but this...
You're sorry? You just looked at my tits.
Am I dead yet? Just doesn't have the same bite as you would expect. The wiki for this game describes the backtalk mechanic as follows. Backtalk has Chloe use her wits to throw insults back at the other characters or cleverly try to change their perspective. Backtalk is optional, and even if you fail a sequence, you can just find another method or route. Cleverly, huh? If I can jump to a different game series that has a similar back and forth idea, Ace Attorney, and specifically Ace Attorney Investigations did this quite nicely. I don't know, maybe it's a bit too much to compare, but it's my video and I'm gonna do it anyway. Considering that both games are based upon narrative aspects, their main characters have to use their words to fight against other people, and both games need to look for verbal cues in their opposition to capitalize on. I think it's more than appropriate to make the comparison. So when you look at someone like Miles Edgeworth, he too has to look for the right words in order to expose those lies that others are telling, and take advantage over the argument with not only logic, but also evidence. And even more so when we get to the sequel title, which unfortunately we didn't get in the West, so say for a fan translation, but... we get access to a mechanic that's more similar to Chloe's backtalk, logic chess, which requires you to carefully select when and what to say against opponents. Sure, he's not actively insulting his opponents, but at least there's a bit more bite to it. Like, a number of the backtalk scenes don't really have anything other than the ambience music to them. I'm not saying that Chloe has to yell objection, although that certainly would make me think a little lighter of her character. No. I think the thing that makes this mechanic not be as impactful as it should be is the lack of any actual music, which, can I say, I actually like the music in Life is Strange. It's nothing that I'd listen to while working out, but it does have a few catchy tunes here and there. And honestly, something like this could have gotten me more interested in the talkback mechanic. After all, if you're going to go with something more mundane, you might as well put a little style for it, and oddly enough, Life is Strange does have a few good aesthetics to it. For example, going back to Miles Edgeworth, not only do they have the logic chess take place in Edgeworth's imagination to help him focus, but the music as well helps add to the situation. And that happens within the regular gameplay of Ace Attorney Investigations. But regardless of my complaints without having to do with some more retconning, this is probably the best thing to add to the actual gameplay that is in line with Chloe's character, for better or worse. Because at this point, the mechanic essentially boils down to, how much of an asshole can Chloe be? With insults that are so paltry that I'm even embarrassed to know Chloe for. Now that we've actually tanked the watch time of this video while going over the mechanics of the game, let's actually take a few moments and check out the concert. Maybe check out the merch.
No shit. This car could slide down any minute. Releasing that brake would roll the car right out from under that tool. Do I want a Firewalk shirt that bad? I think I do. Sorry, dude. Maybe you shouldn't overcharge.
Shit! No, 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 no! Come on!
Thanks for playing, Dick.
That was probably pretty dumb, huh?
Alright, so that seems a little much. Glad to know that going to extremes are still in Chloe's bags of tricks.
That guy's a dick.
Yeah, what a dick, trying to make some money while selling merchandise. Might as well cause a ton of property damage that's probably going to cost more than $20. And to be fair, after this, you are given the choice of stealing $200 from this guy while he's distracted. I mean, he's not the handicap, but I'm at least glad that Chloe is at least not willing to dive headfirst in the territory of terrible yet.
Ryan, look out! Pompidou!
Edginess maybe, but here... Heck, depending on the player, when you bump into someone, you can actually apologize for spilling their beer on them. But here's where we get to the point where I need to complain again. And after such a long time... Hadouken! One of the biggest complaints you could have in modern day adventure games is that your choices don't really matter. And Life is Strange was no stranger to this sort of complaint. After all, with the infamous final binary choice...
Nobody would ever even miss your punk ass, would they?
Get that gun away from me, psycho!
Your choices don't matter.
But when it comes to the prequel, this opens up more problems, and we'll get to them more when we get to the next backtalk section, cause yeah, that's a big problem. For now though...
Fuck. Hey, you okay?
I'm fine.
Relax. You bumped into me, remember?
So, why do we even have these choices?
Hear that? We have options!
Even if you apologize to the guy, Chloe will still get confronted by him and his friend, and threatened for spilling a beer. Seems a little much, but okay. Since this is the instant where Rachel has to come in and save... God, what was with people's hair in the 2000s? In any case, regardless of your choices, this event will still happen. So it makes me question why we even need this choice in the first place. Why give us the illusion of choice if the options still bring us to this point? And ultimately, this is patently bullshit.
What the hell?
And not just because of the usual foul Telltale style. And as a side note, that's what I was referring to in my previous video on the subject. Telltale was famous for the having your choices matter but not really aspect to their games. But this also refers to the railroading and leads to one of the biggest issues with this story being a prequel, because the game itself has to be set for the mainline game, lest you get things like continuity errors. And we're about to get into why in the next section, but for the sake of giving context, after saving Chloe, she and Rachel danced the night away with some really awkward mocapping. While I said that just because this game is a prequel doesn't affect my thoughts of the game, the fact that this is a prequel will affect the game itself, especially with the lie that was the whole "your choices matter," because ultimately in this game they don't. And before you hand wave away that saying that the narrative matters, well, if that's the case, why even bother putting these in? Why bother making this a game in the first place? If you just want to focus on the narrative, why not just make a movie, since that's practically what Life is Strange is? An interactive movie.
You take that back!
Don't just hand wave away these choices when they were put into the game, because they were a conscious decision. Rants aside, we know the fates of Chloe and Rachel, and attempting to actually give the player some level of choice doesn't work with prequels, since if you do things that go outside the pre-established development characters, it leads to more questions than actual answers. Like, take for example the second backtalk session you have, this time with David. You know David, right?
I will remember this conversation.
Well, not really.
In Before the Storm, David is simply dating Chloe's mother. And in the morning after the concert, David tries to talk to Chloe, after probably the most awkward fist bump I've ever seen.
The most patient man in the world. Please, Chloe! Please!
I don't normally use this word, but cringe. But here are two things to consider with the backtalk with David. First, if you choose to go along with it, but you somehow fail...
Bad you don't know who you're dealing with here.
You can't threaten me. You know how I know? Because you just tried, and you.
Won't stand for your disrespectful mouth. Regard for authority unites us, gives us dignity, and we are better united than divided. Joyce, your mother, she's hurting, Chloe. Hurting for you. You've had it rough, no doubt about it. But all this staying out late, ignoring her command, drinking, drug use, it's making everything harder for her. You need to shape up, get your act together, and put someone else first for a damn change. Am I making myself clear?
Is it crazy if part of what David's saying makes sense to me?
Got it. Thanks. We should really get going.
To point this out, you get the same speech if you don't enact the backtalk mechanic. But to get to the real meat of the situation, you can see that David is expressing his concern for not only Joyce but also Chloe, whose rampant behavior is causing her mother harm and distress. But should you enact the backtalk mechanic,
breaking her heart.
At least she has a heart. All you have is... What's it called when you've got 1 porn stash and 0 game?
Ooh.
Do I come to your place of employment and... Oh, that's right. You don't have one.
Kill me now.
If you were a man,
It's cool. If you were a man, I wouldn't go so easy on you either.
I hate you.
Are you fucking kidding me? Let me get this straight. This new gameplay mechanic that basically puts Chloe into the asshole corner covers up any actual characterization for other characters? I'm sorry, but when Chloe is being the aggressor here, you'll have to forgive me when I don't see David as the big bad guy when he was made out to be. What was Chloe's reasoning for why she didn't like David again?
You do realize I hate your boyfriend with every fiber of my being, right?
Chloe! You don't hate him.
He calls me girly. He's a dickhole.
Oh no, what a horrible monster. Better make the situation much worse by being overly aggressive. Sorry, but I kinda need more of a reason to hate this version of David. Someone who is actively trying to make things better in Chloe's life at this point in time. You know, I find it funny that people think I found it justifiable that David hits Chloe in my original video. That's not hyperbole. People actually said that. See? When have you actually bothered to listen to what I said in my video? While I can understand Chloe's hatred of David and how he can be a bastard in this is not a good flag for me to like Chloe, since David was right to suspect her. I never excused that. I condemned that, but I also found reason to dislike Chloe in that same scene since David's suspicions of her stealing a gun were correct. It's fans like this who help contribute to my disdain for these games and fandoms, since they're actively projecting their own behavior onto those who have problems with the game. So let me spell it out clearly for people. David's slap is unwarranted. His remarks to Chloe in this game were hurtful and casually sexist.
Why do you women always take forever to get ready?
But people seem to forget scenes like these.
Who do you think your principal calls when you skip? Do you think I enjoy lying for you? Saying you're sick just so you don't get expelled? Between your grades and your disregard for my rules, I see you slipping. I'm worried.
But Mom, the whole point of lowering expectations is so you won't be disappointed in me. Never again.
Well, just look at all the f***s I give.
You're happy doing what you're doing? Fine. Keep at it. Just let me know so I can stop fighting with Blackwell to keep you on scholarship. Money's tight enough as it is.
This is actually a trend that I've noticed nowadays, that if you dare to even be a little open-minded towards one side in an argument, that you're automatically a bad person for trying to get to the other side of a story. Yes, Chloe has had a harsh life, but that doesn't excuse her actions that put her mother into stressful situations, all the while doing things that make her worry. Drugs, staying out late, not bothering to text when she's out late, and who knows what else. And David is just trying to help Chloe and by extension, Joyce. Which, by Chloe's own admission...
Is it crazy if part of what David's saying makes sense to me?
Hell, later in the game we learn more about David's backstory where we learn that he suffers from a form of PTSD.
He died, and I didn't. And I think about that fact every damn day. The point is, I've had my share of grief. I know what you're going through. So I guess what I'm saying is, I'm here to do whatever I can to help you get over the loss of your dad.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
Please, I'm begging you. Give David a chance, won't you?
Fuck you!
Here. Why don't you keep this photo for a little while? Think about
what I've said.
Now, obviously, you can reject this photo, but I do want to point out two things. The first being, 90% of players chose this option. So, not only did a ton of people that find David's backstory was sympathetic to a degree, but there was an overwhelming majority who did. The second thing is, David is actively trying to help Chloe. And with this context in mind, it really makes it harder for me to actually like Chloe when she's actively attempting to push others away or outright attack them. Chloe is wasting a scholarship and her mother is working her ass off to support her. And I'm supposed to like this character?
Well, fuck that.
I do have a big point, but there's one more thing I need to point out. Yes, Chloe is a teenager. Yes, she is in pain because of her life. But so what? People will often point to this and go, this excuses her behavior. But I disagree with that, especially since the point we're talking about is how likable someone is. A fictional character at that, and especially on a personal level. Also, in Life is Strange, Chloe is 19 years old. You know, the age of an adult. Just because there's a reason, that somehow means any critique or complaints are null. That's not how that works. Not that any of this matters. You wanna know why? Because no matter what your choices are in this game, Chloe and David will still be at each other's throats in the original game.
The last person I would ever talk to about my dad is you.
Chloe.
Think it over for more than a minute. It's a basic courtesy, you know, when people offer to help.
You're out of your fucking mind.
I just threw open my mouth.
Even if you want David and Chloe to get along, it doesn't matter because the original game still exists, and your choices in this game do not affect it. And this isn't really the only other instance of this happening. A smaller example is when Chloe and Rachel are, well, I guess cementing their relationship. You're given an option to either kiss Rachel, tell her to get a tattoo, or get her bracelet. The last option makes no bloody sense, especially when you consider that in the episode 2 of the original game, one of the major factors of conflict between Chloe and Frank is that Frank has Rachel's bracelet.
That's a huge jump in logic in so many ways.
And don't give me the whole, well, it's more the narrative, the choices don't matter.
Rachel Amber is not just a hero to Chloe. She might not be a hero at all to Chloe. The player's decisions will play a big role in determining exactly what their relationship is like and what kind of an impact Rachel's gonna have on her.
I fail to see the logic here.
This is the lead writer for the game. So I'm sorry, but if the lead writer points out that choices actually do matter, then I'm going to take them at their word and judge the story that they put forward. So do you see why a prequel for this kind of game doesn't work? In games that have you make choices in order to progress the story, prequels don't work unless they're heavily planned in advance and could somehow affect the outcome of the original game. Not only would it be a terrible thing to reprogram, but also would not be possible to do when the prequel was being made, since there was a voice actor strike going on, and would have a very big dissonance between the pre-established voice actors and the replacements. So while I'm not judging the game because it's a prequel, I'm judging the game because of its inability to work as a prequel and inability to work with the original game. It raises more questions about the characters than it actually will show, and it ultimately makes any and all choices in the game inconsequential. What's the point of trying to understand Joyce and David if Chloe's still going to be a jackass to them in the future? Speaking of judging... oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Rachel Amber.
Rachel.
You know, funny story, in my comment section, I got a ton of people complaining about Rachel and how she was even worse than Chloe. And I'm actually in agreement.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
We need to consider two factors when it comes to Rachel, and that's the two relationships with Frank and Jefferson. So not only was she going behind Chloe's back and two-timing her with two guys, but it really makes it hard to like her as a character, especially considering what Before the Storm was trying to accomplish. To attempt to explain and flesh out the relationship between Chloe and Rachel, or at least attempt to. In the original game, Rachel was just a MacGuffin, and in this game, we're seeing why Rachel was special to Chloe. And because we're looking through the eyes of Chloe, we're seeing this through the eyes of a biased perspective. And I'd believe that if this was a flashback. This isn't really seeing things through the eyes of Chloe. This story has us sitting in the back seat, watching this incredibly rushed relationship blossom, because the entirety of Before the Storm takes place in the span of 3 to 5 days, if my math is correct. So, on the first night, we've got the two meetings. And on the second day, they hang out on the train, trying to learn more about each other, doing a dumb game where they spy on people.
And the Lord saideth, Thou shalt make a burnt offering of your firstborn son. Who are you talking to, Dad? No one, son.
The two steal some booze in one of the oddliest, creepiest animation I've seen this series so far. The fuck was that guy doing? And we get this scene.
I don't always drink beer, but when I do, I prefer drinking it next to an old toilet. Home run! Can I see? Sure. I asked you to leave me alone. Are you kidding me? I know you're the school princess and all, with the DA daddy and the perfect grades and all the perfect little Victoria chases kissing your perfect ass, but seriously? Fuck you. Great. I'm leaving. See you around, Chloe. You can't leave! Watch me. Rachel, wait! Don't go. Why not? Because I don't want to ruin this the way I ruin everything else in my life. And what is this exactly? I mean, fuck. Are you actually going to make me say it? Say what? Exactly. You know, like a friendship. But more. Ah, I know. Weird, right? It's just, today was the best day I've had since my dad died. And when I almost ruined it just now, the way I ruin everything, it made me realize whatever's going on between us is special. Come on, say something. Chloe, you know what? Forget it. This was really stupid. I mean, you're Rachel Amber, and I'm Chloe Price. It's not that!
Okay, I know at this point in time, Chloe doesn't know that the man the two spied on was Rachel's father, but this seems to be going a bit too fast!
No, I don't understand. You can't just turn on me for no reason. I'm sorry, turn on you? I guess I forgot. It's always about how you feel, isn't it? Sad Chloe's fucking sad again. Maybe you should try giving a shit about other people for once.
You two have only known each other personally for a day, yet these lines act like these two have been friends with each other for a while now, when it's hardly been a single day. I understand there was only 3 episodes to this game, but there's a reason why things called time skips are a thing. At least this would have been a bit more believable for this scene. It just feels really rushed to me. And the funny thing is, this could have been rectified if these two actually knew each other more personally before this whole situation. Like, maybe the two had seen each other at previous concerts and hung out afterwards a few times, steadily getting closer and maybe even having the butt of a friendship. You wouldn't even need to waste a lot of time with this. Maybe just have a bunch of photos of the two at different concerts and show it in Chloe's diary or something. At least then, I'd believe that the two had a bit more of a connection and it wouldn't feel so stiff and rushed. Like, here's a quick timeline of the events. You tell me that this doesn't seem like way too fast. Episode 1 has a lot of gaps where you could assume relationship and friendship was probably being fleshed out, but we didn't get to see it. Like, we still don't know why Rachel was at the mill and what she and Chloe did for the rest of that night. I'm sorry, but from what we're shown, it's hard for me to believe that these two would have had feelings for each other, regardless of teenage hormones. And even more so when they talk like they've known each other for a while.
I'm feeling everything that I'm feeling. It was the junkyard scene in episode 1 where Chloe is just like crying and beating on cars and things. And Phil had told me, as a motivation, he just said, "You can't be with someone you love anymore." And immediately that person popped into my head. And since then, it's just been holding on to the memory of who they are to me and how they feel in relation to me. That's been driving how I play Chloe for a lot of this.
That's all well and good, but Chloe loved Rachel? They only started really speaking to each other for barely a day! But, in any case, Let's actually take a few moments and talk about Rachel, shall we? Well, I say a few moments, but I still got like about 8 pages left. Oh dear God. What did the lead writer have to say about Rachel Amber?
Imperfection is something that we embrace with this story, for sure. Rachel Amber has a power and a charisma and a meaning to Chloe that is, you know from the first game if you played it, incredible. We don't know for sure that it's purely good. We hope with the story in Before the Storm to raise this question of, it can be amazing to meet a person who has that power. It's not necessarily a good thing all the time either, because people are inherently complex. Rachel Amber is not just a hero to Chloe. She might not be a hero at all to Chloe. The player's decisions will play a big role in determining exactly what their relationship is like and what kind of an impact Rachel's gonna have on her.
That she might not be a hero at all. Well, that's straight up wrong. So let me tell you guys straight. I don't like Rachel Amber as a character. I find her to be a selfish little brat that the story is actively trying to look good and sympathetic.
She might not be a hero at all to Chloe.
Really? Because the story certainly doesn't want to make it that way, despite the symbolic imagery. The game doesn't necessarily want you to like Rachel, but it casts a positive spotlight on her because we are apparently seeing the story through the perspective of Chloe. But of course, the players aren't Chloe, so we see Rachel's flaws. She is self-centered, she is selfish, she's ungrateful. I think you get the damn point. But why do I think this? Well, there are 3 scenes I want to cover that highlight this. There are a number of them, but for the sake of time, we won't go over everything. For the first scene, we need to establish a little bit of context. On the first day of the second episode, after a blatant recap from Chloe, depending on your choices, you can either get Chloe expelled or suspended for the rest of the year. And said choice also affects the event I want to talk about. You see, depending on your choices in that meeting, Rachel will either be in the play or will not be in it. And depending on what the choice is, there will be 2 scenarios with the same outcome. The first scenario has a character named Victoria, a girl from the main title who was your stereotypical popular bitch, who oddly enough got a bit more character development than Chloe did in that game, which is kind of weird, but whatever. Anyway, in this scenario, Chloe comes across Victoria drugging a drink that's for Rachel, so she can take over the lead in the play.
I need to find whatever Victoria slipped into that drink.
Okay, so aside from the pranks going from hurtful to borderline homicidal, why do you need to do this? What I mean is find out what Victoria put in the drink. You could easily just dump that concoction in the trash like any normal sane person. But here's the real rut. You don't have to support Rachel. You can support Victoria to take the lead role from Rachel, but it's a moot point, because Rachel will still become the lead of the play. No matter what you do, Victoria will pass out and Rachel will be a part of the play.
The player's decisions will play a big role in determining exactly what their relationship is like and what kind of an impact Rachel's gonna have on.
So much for choice! Now, that's only if Rachel didn't get kicked out, because you swap the drinks, and Victoria will get knocked out. But what happens if Rachel can't be part of the play?
Tea? For your instrument. We want you at your best tonight.
Okay, V. Time to shine.
Oh, Price, that was epic! You distracted her just long enough for me to slip those pills into her tea.
I did.
Oh, okay. I better start getting into costume before...
Sweet Carnation, we're ruined. The show is ruined.
That was quick.
Rachel drugs Victoria. What the actual fuck? So this is fucking terrible on so many levels. Let's first look at Chloe. Why is there no questioning of this? Even if we're supposed to believe that we're looking at Rachel through rose-tinted glasses, are you telling me that Chloe wouldn't have any problem with Rachel drugging someone? And to point something out, there has been this symbology of Rachel Amber being on fire and how fire is dangerous, stuff in Chloe's dreams, and I'll be talking more about that later, but this isn't something that Chloe finds issue with? You're telling me Chloe wouldn't have a problem with Rachel drugging someone? Wow, what a likable duo of characters! Then, when you think about this on a meta level, and this goes into spoilers, but I already put that tag up and talked about this, so you have no one to blame yourselves, in the original game, there were a few instances of people being drugged. Oh, and Chloe being shot in the head.
What the fuck?
Orgullosamente Latino hasta la muerte y después. Worldwide Latino pride.
Kate Marsh was a girl who you can save from suicide in the original game. She was drugged and was made to perform in a viral video that was tasteless to say the least. It's what leads to her attempting suicide in the first game. Then there's Max. Boy oh boy, so let's come right out. Jefferson, the teacher I mentioned earlier, is the one who killed Rachel in the original game and drugged Max so he could, and I'm not joking, take pictures of her.
Oh, Max. I'm so glad you asked that question. Simply put, I'm obsessed with the idea of capturing that moment innocence evolves into corruption. That shift from black to white to gray and beyond. Most models are cynical. They lose that naivete. However, some Blackwell students carry their hope and optimism with them like an aura. And those lucky few become my models. My subjects.
It's just a really stupid motivation that's not worth going into here for this video, but my point is, in a series that has established that drugging people was done by villains, it kinda kneecaps the whole premise when one of the main characters that's supposed to be the hope for Chloe is actively drugging someone!
Oh my dude, you just got pranked! Bet you didn't see that one coming, huh?
And I know this isn't a very analytical way of explaining myself, but it's shitty writing. And I hope that you understand why.
Rachel Amber is not just a hero.
Maybe, but the game certainly doesn't frame it like that. Are you telling me that Chloe's moral compass is so eroded that she wouldn't have a problem with this? And you know what would have actually made this better? No joke. Actually have a choice here. Have the players decide if what Rachel did was messed up and have Chloe call her out on it. Or at the very least, go, wait, what? At least you'd have a little more agency to give your players, and while Chloe could still be horrible, if you choose to allow Rachel to pull this crap, at least we could see that Chloe would at least be conflicted on the matter.
I distracted her just long enough for me to slip those pills into her tea. I did.
What the fuck is this shit? God, this could be a video on its own, but I don't have time. We're already nearing the 32-minute mark. Although, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the play as a side note.
Most strange, bountiful fortune hath mine enemies brought to this shore. Here, cease more questions. Thou art inclined to sleep.
No matter how badly you do, you get rave reviews. Yay! What is choice? What is consequences? Who cares? The second section that I want to talk about involves Rachel's parents. The context is that after the play, Chloe and Rachel have talks about leaving Arcadia Bay, but before they do that, they have to go through a dinner with Rachel's parents. Dinner at 10:38 p.m. by the way. Who the hell eats dinner that late, especially when you are working upper-class individuals? And what the hell is wrong with that milk? Ugh! In any case, tensions rise during this dinner.
There must be some room for personal responsibility. I'm sure you agree, Chloe.
My dad was super responsible. He always drove under the speed limit. Then one day, a truck came along and turned him into a super responsible pancake.
Excuse me, what? Did you just use your father's death as a retort about personal responsibility? What the
I just threw up in my mouth.
See? This is why it's so important to invite diverse voices to converse with one another. It's absolutely stimulating.
I'm sorry, are you saying that was a good rebuttal?
Obviously, this movie has its head up its own anus.
And we learned that the woman that Rachel's father kissed was actually her biological mother. And that while the Ambers had been keeping her away, paying her to stay away from Rachel because she was a druggie to the point where she OD'd, and why do I care about this?
Rachel, that woman you saw, that wasn't my mistress. That was your mother.
This is one of the weakest plot twists ever. And for some reason, the rest of the story focuses on Rachel's mother. Why? This story turned into Rachel Amber's backstory, which, not for naught, isn't why we're here. We're here to learn about the relationship between Chloe and Rachel. Hell, for most of episode 3, Rachel's not even in it. We also have to take in consideration Chloe and Rachel believe that Sarah could be a changed person.
She wants to see me?
Yes. But Rachel, it cannot be.
Why not? If that's what Rachel wants.
Drug addiction is a disease. It afflicts everyone, not just the addict. I will not allow you to be victimized by her disease again.
Even if that's true, Rachel could still meet her. And maybe the fact that she wants to see me means she's gotten better.
A few canonical minutes earlier.
Best part is, she and I use the same drug dealer.
Don't you love it when a chaptered game that takes months apart for each chapter to make have little gems like this that really make you go... In any case, Mr. Amber counters that since Sarah's been taking money for 15 years, instead of actually wanting to clean up, Sarah hasn't changed. And to give some credit to Chloe, she at least tries to understand Mr. Amber's side in this.
This must be hard for you too, Mr. Amber.
It could be far worse. My biggest fear is that Rachel will try to meet Sarah. I've dreaded it.
So that's why you never told her?
You have no idea what pain Sarah's caused. Her addiction has led her to do terrible things. I don't want Rachel to go through any of that.
I don't understand. Are you afraid that Sarah would do something to Rachel? Do you think Sarah is involved with any of the drug dealers around here?
Best part is, she and I use the same drug dealer.
Why do I even bother trying? Anyway, after this whole thing, we get a scene of Chloe and Rachel talking in Rachel's room. It tries to be very artistic and deep with star talk, but if you've seen Ulrich Salad Bar's video, you know it's dumb. And yes, I did get inspiration from him. You don't have to keep telling me, I already admitted it. Shut up.
I don't know. If they're not even real, then what's the point? It's all lies. Everything. My entire life. My dad. My mom. If I can even call her that anymore.
Say what now? Look, I get that your trust is broken, Rachel. Having such an earth-shattering revelation is something that a lot of people wouldn't get to understand or experience. But to basically hand-wave away all those years of your parents giving you their love, all the time they put into raising you, especially your mother who loved you unconditionally even though you're not blood-related, is just... stupid. I'm sorry I'm not being analytical here, but it's just stupid. And I get you're upset for being lied to. But you were just told that your mother chose money and drugs over you for 15 years. That's practically your entire life. And you're upset you can't meet this woman? Why would you want to? And you're willing to basically cast aside everything your family did to you just for someone you think may have changed, that you don't know, that you barely have any interaction with while you're conscious.
Dad, stop. None of this is real. You're not real. Rachel's family isn't real.
I'm sorry, but what? Why is the love of Rachel's family not real? Because they told a lie they thought would be in Rachel's best interest? Something that, funnily enough, a lot of parents do in order to ensure the well-being of their kids. The game is trying to be really deep here, but unfortunately, with everything we're presented with, it only takes a few moments of actually thinking to say that this is stupid. And I'm aware that emotions are overruling, especially for a teenager, but we're told so much that Rachel is good at reading people, and that she's smart. So why can't she, in the time between learning this information and when she meets up with Chloe in the junkyard the next day, Take some time and think about this logically. This just makes Rachel to be an over-emotional, spoiled brat who's willing to basically throw everything away for something in the moment. Funnily enough, this leads into the third example of why I don't like Rachel, and that's the symbolism that they show in the game. Throughout the game, we're given some very blatant symbolism about Rachel, hinting at her infidelity that was made canon in the first game. They do this with a whole bunch of fire metaphors, a lot of fire stuff, you get the idea. And yet, despite these dream premonitions that Chloe gets, she never once questions Rachel to the point where she's willing to break into Mr. Amber's office, steal some money from Mr. Amber, burn some evidence, trying to find Sarah's number, and basically almost gets busted by the police. Hell, Chloe questions her father's perfection in this, but not once questions Rachel at all? I'm sorry, but this doesn't make me like Rachel. And I find it very unbelievable that such a deep trust could be made between Chloe and Rachel, which is something that should have been built up with this game, and that there should have been more than just a handful of days to have this level of trust between the two.
Dad, stop. None of this is real. You're not real. Rachel's family isn't real.
If you have this level of skepticism, why is none of it levied at Rachel? Yes, I'm aware that in emotional times, trust can be something valuable, and you're not always going to be thinking the most logically. Just because people are creatures of emotion, that doesn't mean logic is thrown out the window, and vice versa though. Let's talk about another game. Take the Persona series, specifically 5. There's actually a scene that has a similar beat to it, where someone trusts a person they barely know with a very serious subject. And Takamaki is a student who's being pressured by a teacher into sleeping with him, just to make sure that her best friend doesn't lose her spot in the sports team. She's been sidestepping his advances, and she's been at the breaking point, when the main character Joker just coincidentally overhears her conversation and begins to follow her. After a small little chase sequence, the two seclude themselves in a more private place and Anne spills her heart out. But here's the thing, she doesn't ask him for help, she doesn't rely on him, and she doesn't have him do anything illegal for her, because it's not his problem, and doesn't want to get others involved. And throughout the rest of the game, you grow closer with the girl, becoming friends and learning more about her. This is how you establish this type of relationship with trust, at foundation of a tragic event that's even ongoing, not demanding those who are willing to listen and not manipulating them either. Hell, you want me to like Chloe? Have Chloe go against Rachel's wishes. Have her be the one to seek out the phone number on her own volition. Have her think, maybe if I do this for Rachel, she can get some closure. That would make Chloe seem a little bit more selfless, and it wouldn't paint Rachel as a terrible person. But perhaps the manipulation is the point of Before the Storm, that Chloe and Rachel's relationship is toxic, that leads to the tragic end of both of them. But if it is, oh boy does it suck! Not only does it raise more questions than it answers, and trust me, I could bring up a ton of more examples of this. Like for example, how did Frank go from an alright guy who was willing to defend Chloe and Rachel, and turned into the asshole for the main game? A prequel shouldn't be bringing more questions to the table, nor should it attempt to raise flags for the original story it's basing it on. Hey, post-edit comment here, and I actually forgot that I want to talk about Rachel's characterization and how it contradicts itself. So let's take these scenes for example.
You lying, cheating piece of shit, motherfucker.
Excuse me?
Kissing that woman.
James.
Rachel? Honey, whatever you saw or think you saw, I know it's hard, but I need you to trust me.
No offense, Mr. Amber, but I think we trust our eyes more than you.
Why can't you just tell me the fucking truth? Stop lying!
I want to make it clear that I agree with Rachel here in concept. That is kind of a problem. When you go back to play the original though, you get this scene.
That makes me ill that Rachel posed like this for Frank. I wrote him love letters. I can't believe she was banging Frank. Rachel straight up lied to my face. Why didn't she say anything?
So, let me get this straight. A character who knows the heartbreak and pain that infidelity and lying to your loved ones can create, then goes on to lie to the person who's been through this entire event and acting as support, and has stated that she's afraid of becoming her father, becomes the thing she hates.
That's gonna be a fucking yikes from me.
Since it's acting as a replacement foundation. Otherwise, it acts as a replacement foundation that's built on sand or rotted wood. Now, like last time, I think it's only fair that I talk about what makes a good prequel. And even though I gushed about it in its own video, let's talk about Yakuza 0.
Yeah, you know what? Oh, too bad!
I think that just because something is a prequel, that doesn't mean it can't be good, whether it stands on its own or works as an addition to the original story built. I've already listed reasons why I think Before the Storm is a terrible prequel, but for this part of the video, we'll be going over what I think makes an actually good prequel. And since not a lot of you watched my Yakuza 0 video, you're gonna sit down and enjoy this, boys and girls! Yakuza 0 is the 6th game in the Yakuza franchise, and is a prequel to the story, but unlike, say, Before the Storm, it doesn't have any actual meaningful choices that would affect the narrative. Sure, there are choices in the game, but I say that with heavy quotes. This, to me, is how you do choice well in a prequel. You offer inconsequential choices that shouldn't have an impact in the story itself, but can impact the smaller stories in the game. It doesn't help that it can be really funny at the same time. And can really do a number for humanizing the two main characters, Kiryu and Majima, who, if you're not aware, are technically criminals. I mean, they are a part of the Yakuza, or were a part of it. And already we've gotten ourselves something that actively makes Yakuza 0 a better prequel. The choices don't matter. They don't affect the main plot, but can still offer something to the players, whether it be for entertainment value or interesting subplots. Subplots don't really waste your time, since most of them are optional to do. While I'll dive into this a bit deeper in later sections of this video, the sub-stories often allow the player to get a deeper look into the main characters' heads and personalities, putting them into more outrageous situations that allow the player to view the characters in different lights, fleshing out who they are.
Okay.
It's one of the things I'll get more into, but needless to say, by having more unique avenues for our characters to explore, it works wonders for people to actually adapt and get used to these characters. Yeah, that works wonders for people to actually get to know these characters. But now, let's talk about the main story and how it works as a prequel. Now I want to point something out. Yakuza 0 still has the weakness of being a prequel to a very long-running series. After all, if Kiryu, the main protagonist, was to die in this game, then that'd be a pretty big plot hole.
Snake, what have you done? You changed the future. You've created a time paradox.
And supposedly it would be a pretty steep hill for the game to rise up to. But here's a fun trick, and something that Before the Storm should have done. It doesn't attempt to flesh out a character who was basically a MacGuffin with something that won't actually have a connection to the main story. What do I mean? Well, this is where we talk about Yakuza's main story. In the first game, and Kiwami, which is a remake, the main antagonist was a character named Nishiki, someone who was the lead's best friend and sworn brother to Kiryu, even to the point where Kiryu is willing to go as far as to jail for Nishiki.
Dojima組長 桐生組長が趣味を無理やりだから撃っちまったんだカッとなっちまって何発もユミおいしっかりしろやっちまった東上会の大幹部を錦 ユミを連れて逃げろ。何言ってんだ。おめえこそユミ連れて逃げろ。お前がいなくなったら妹はどうなるんだ。次の手術が最後なんだろう。そんな時。
Yeah, normally I'd use the English dub of the original Yakuza game, but...
The fuck you think you're doing? Just what the fuck family are you from, huh?
Excuse me.
Excuse you? No.
Fun fact, Majima was actually voiced by Mark Hamill.
This is the part where you're supposed to laugh! Laugh, you stupid motherfucker!
Yakuza 0, we actually got to see how Kiryu and Nishiki's sworn brotherhood developed, basically fleshing out how these two characters were so close to each other, even to the point where Nishiki was willing to kill not only Kiryu, but himself in order to spare them from the Yakuza's wrath. Basically, Kiryu did a big stupid thing in the beginning and got himself accused of a crime, and now there's a whole thing here. It's a long story that would make this video 10 times longer if I went through detailed with it.
組の命令ってことなのか、錦。そんなんじゃねえ。桐生、お前、組の制裁で殺される人間がどういう目に遭うか知ってるか。堂島組ってとこは見せしめの死体を作る天才だぜ。人間がどの程度痛めつければ死ぬのかよく知ってる。それをとことん死なねえように殺すんだ。生かしたまんま。できるだけ長く苦しむようにだ。生きたまま解剖されるような拷問されて散々痛めつけられた挙句、そして後になって見つかった死体はもう人間と呼べるようなもんじゃねえ。俺はな、桐生、兄弟として
Anyway, while there was some light shown on these two characters' relationships, with Yakuza 0, the developers came up with the brilliant idea of showing how the two characters were close with each other in a more real time. This is how you flesh out a backstory of characters, basically showing their relationship with each other as well as the events that got them to where they were in the main story. Remember, these events in the characters' past have already happened. We're just watching them unfold. And the sworn brotherhood between Kiryu and Nishiki is a great example of how to do this, that we see that they're willing to sacrifice what they can do for each other because of their bond.
お前、自分が何してんのか分かってんのか。言ったはずだ。今俺に手を貸せば、お前は。うるせえ！俺は、おめえがいねえ登場会でのし上がっても意味がねえんだ。おめえがいくら言ったとこで俺との縁は切らしゃしねえ。錦、覚悟しろよ。俺は一生おめえにつきまとってやる。そこまで腹くくられたんじゃもう何も言えねえな。暴れてやろうぜ、兄弟。行くぞ。
Doesn't hurt they can be total badasses at the same time. We get to actually see the struggles of these two as they try to maintain their relationship, despite the strain of the Yakuza pressures and how Kiryu is willing to paint a target on his back to keep his sworn brother safe from the family he defected from, with Nishiki rejecting that and willing to put his own life on the line for Kiryu. Yakuza 0 does a great job of doing this in order to illustrate the relationship between these two characters in a more tragic light when you get to the first game's story. These two characters who are more than willing to go so far to protect each other that they eventually become enemies.
一番大切にしていたお前たちを失った。もう戻ろうと思っても10年前に戻ることはできねえ。もうその運命から逃げることはできねえ。だから決着をつけよう。なあ、決着をつけよう。俺たちの戦いに。
Okay, it's not settled with a dance-off, but a fight between these two. But you get the idea. The prequel doesn't attempt to change the history of Yakuza. Well, there are a few things, but it depends on if you're playing the remakes or the original games. You get my point. It doesn't want to change the history, but rather tell the history. And this is part of the reason why I disagree that a prequel story is inherently bad. Prequels exist to explain the past of stories in order to flesh out any mystery for the fans. Sure, you can argue that the ending is spoiled. We know canonically both Kiryu and Nishiki won't actually die in Yakuza 0, but I'd counter with the fact that we're not here for the ending. We're here for the journey. It just so happens that the journey itself is a content-full adventure that has a ton of side stories, a pretty tight combat system, and some kick-ass music. So I'd be lying if I didn't say that Yakuza 0 didn't have a leg up on Before the Storm in several ways. Hell, I'd argue that it's objectively a better game than Life is Strange, in terms of content, story, presentation, and music. So let's take a moment and talk about a specific character, much like how I did with Rachel Amber.
This is the part where you're supposed to laugh! Laugh, you stupid motherfucker!
Goro Majima. He's a well-known reoccurring character in Yakuza, a character who's got his interesting role where he'll be an ally in some games and scenes, or he'll be a boss. But regardless, Majima has a very intriguing and fun character for the series.
でも親父、これでこの配線を解読できるんですか？
アホか！俺がこないなごちゃごちゃしたもんわかるはずないやろが。せやけどやらにゃしゃあないから。こうやって勘を働かしとるんやないか。勘?
But regardless, Majima has been a very intriguing and fun character for the series. And in Yakuza 0, he's one of the two playable characters. Back in 1988, so when he was a young man. So you got a character who's mostly been seen like this. Acting like this.
こいつはおごりや。たーんと飲み。どうや、神様からのお恵みは。
ありがとうございます。私はこの酒を一度浴びるように飲んでみたかったのですが、おかげさまで夢が叶いました。
Now here's where we talk about development in prequels. So heads up, if you played Yakuza 4, we actually play a character named Taiga Sajima, a character that was a sworn brother with Majima, and when you play as Sajima, your goal is to get the truth from Majima. As it turns out, the sworn brothers were supposed to kill another group of Yakuza, but Majima didn't show up, and as a result, Taiga was thrown into jail for his attack, spending 25 years in the clink. As it turns out, Majima was actually being held up by another member of the Yakuza he's a part of.
迷惑をかけることになってしまいます。兄弟はもう向かってねえや。じゃあ俺はどうしたらいいんじゃ。真島さん。あんたは俺に兄弟裏切れっちゅうんか。このまま見殺しにせっちゅうんか。落ち着いて、落ち着いて。俺は行く。たとえどんな裏があっても構わへん。俺にとって冴島はたった一人の兄弟なんじゃ。真島さん。でもそれじゃああなたの身も。うるさい、関係ないわ。こっちはそないのもとっくに捨てる払ってきたんじゃ。そうですか。それじゃ仕方ありませんね。おい。柴田。
And in Yakuza 0, we see Majima's time being fleshed out, at least 3 years after the attack. And while we got this scene in Yakuza 4, we still get more added to Majima's backstory and what happens after this event in time. We learn of the hardships that Majima, he's forced to run one of the biggest cabaret clubs, with the looming debt and threat of the family over his head. This game also shows a kinder and more compelling side of Majima too. For a bit of context, Majima's tasked with finding and killing Makoto Makimura, whom at first he thinks is a burly man.
これはお邪魔やったかな。
この方、店長をご指名でいらっしゃったんですよ。お仕事が大変みたいで、体中カチカチで、私が無理言って施術させてもらったんです。ですよね。
ああ、そうや。
But it actually turns out, his target was a blind young woman.
なんや。
怖かった。怖かったよ。
大丈夫や。
With his own life on the line, should he fail to do this quest, he'll be killed. Majima throws his own goals and life to the side to protect someone who has nothing to do with his situation. Even when there's a chance to get out by killing another girl who looks like Makoto, we get this scene.
ほんまに身代わり立てるしか手がないんや。この先誠を守りきるには誠の死体が必要や。このままやったらいつか誠んとこにお前以外の殺し屋が来る。それより前にお前もやられるで。なんでそれがわからんねや。それやったらそれで俺が向かってくるもん一人残らずぶっ殺したらばなんやと。そんなできるわけや。確かに一度黒に染まったもんはどこまで行っても黒や。そっから抜けることはできんけどな。それでも噛みつく相手選ぶくらいはできる。それが俺の流儀や。おい、やめろや。
Now, granted, to some other events in the game, the scapegoat does bite the dust, but not by Majima's hands. But this is how you expand upon a character in a prequel. In order to flesh out a character without actively contradicting the main story, you need to show different sides of them, because funnily enough, over time, people can change, they evolve, they grow up, they mature. Well, most of the time. Like a sword tempered in fire, the more you refine it, the stronger it becomes, and people are just the same. Just don't throw them into the fire and expect something to come out. We need to be able to see the characters react to the scenes in question, and there needs to be a connection to the main story events as well. This is why, in my humble opinion, Before the Storm fails in that regard. There was such a heavy focus on Rachel's mother that there wasn't really anything to latch onto in my opinion. Especially since these characters don't have any foothold in the story. Rachel's mother, Rachel's family. We don't get to see them in the main game, so what's the point? Meanwhile, in Yakuza, not only is Majima's situation directly related to events that are in the previous games, but they also flesh out his character and show the connection between the plot threads. To put it simply, there's a connection between the prequel's plot and the main story, and it fleshes out the characters at the same time. Doesn't hurt that Majima is basically 100 times more likable than Rachel. Hell, let's talk about that. When it comes to characterization, especially for characters who are supposed to be more negative, for example, Rachel's infidelity and Majima's... There still needs to be something positive for people to latch onto. This is what Rachel and Chloe's relationship should have been, and yet I'm left with nothing but contempt for the character and find the relationship to be rushed and rather poor. As for Majima, well, throughout the prequel and a mainstay throughout the series, you get these sub-stories that, while I've mentioned are optional, do flesh out the characters. Fun little fact, the series is actually titled Ryuga Gotoko, and God, I hope I pronounced that right, also known as Like a Dragon, and was never meant to be seen as crime simulators or anything like that. I mean, there's always been this stigma that Yakuza was sent to be a Japanese GTA, but that's not true. You always play more or less good guys in these games. So while you may be this tough guy who kicks ass, you still go out of your way to, and not kidding, save a daughter from a cult, get a little girl from a UFO catcher. Oh, you cheating piece of crap! Help raise taxes in Japan. Wait, what? We're supposed to help people, aren't we? Helping a statue, street performer, get to the can. And many, many more. There's a reason for why to really like Majima as a character and as a person. Meanwhile, I don't see that charm for Rachel, especially when she's painted to be this chameleon of sorts and very, very likable. I don't see it. And I'm sure that people are going to say that it doesn't matter if I like Rachel, but only if Chloe likes her. Sure, that's a fine point, but when a story asks me to understand a relationship between two characters, and it being the foothold for the main game, I do expect there to see some actual reason as to why Chloe would like Rachel other than just one act of kindness at a concert. Anyway, here's Majima saying,
Hey, wait a minute.
I think it's no surprise that I think highly of the Yakuza series and think poorly of Life is Strange. And some people think it's really weird that I dare compare games that don't share a genre. But here's the thing, we're not comparing genres. We're comparing writing of characters, prequels, relationships, all that jazz. Someone told me in my last video that I should have compared Chloe to that of a Danganronpa character, most notably Sayaka, since both characters use the main protagonist for their own means. But to me, that ignores the actual point I'm trying to make. In my original video, we were talking about how to not make a terrible character. And in this video, we're talking about prequels and how to do them well and not so well. Not necessarily in that order. So I'm making it clear. I'm only looking at these games and characters based on the strength of their character, not the strength of their muscles. I think it's safe to assume that the big burly Yakuza who can fight friggin' tigers could easily beat up 2 teenage girls. Time powers be damned. When talking about writing, while genre can be a factor, it doesn't mean you can't compare 2 stories that have different genres. Nor does it mean that it's impossible to take influence from things you love and apply them to your own work or other people's work and see how it actually reflects upon it. And trust me, I'm well aware of how much people like Chloe and Rachel. Don't let this one nerd on the internet take that away from you. I'm just a guy who likes to voice his opinion about topics he likes. And just because I hold a different opinion than you, that doesn't mean your opinion is invalid, nor does it mean I hold my opinion as gospel. I just like talking about nerd shit.